What's up, Buff fans? It's certainly been a minute, but I am joined by my colleague and great friend, the guy who carries this team on his back, Troy Finnegan. How are you? I know your Seahawks won last night and my 49ers clinched the playoffs, but I'm feeling pretty good NFL wise, and on the Buffs end of things, it's looking pretty good as well.
I'm doing great. Yeah, Seahawks big win last night. I even tweeted about them, which I never do. That's how improbable it was. But I don't want to talk about the 49ers. But I'm doing
Yeah.
great. How are you?
Oh, definitely. I think an exciting ending like that, game-winning drive from Drew Lock deserves a tweet or two. But yeah, I mean, enough of our teams and our fandoms. Looking at the Buffs, that was a wild game last night, but the Buffs offseason has been much crazier to begin with. Just it feels similar to last year, where every day there's a new name that pops up on our timelines, and we're like, whoa, like who's this guy? But this year there's so much depth, and there's a lot of focus in multiple position groups, especially, of course, the offensive line. That certainly was a priority, and they got four guys from different schools that have a lot of starting experience. They're really talented. You got Ukiri Walker from UConn, Tyler Johnson from Houston. He is a ranked number 56 in the Rivals transfer portal. Justin Mayers, UTEP, number 60 in the Rivals transfer portal. Khalil Benson from Indiana. Like last year, we were seeing a lot of FCS guys, a lot of guys that were looking to take a step up into the Power Five, but now we're getting Power Five guys, or the Buffs are getting Power Five guys to really protect Shedeur. That's definitely the mission this offseason, is to not have the most sacked quarterback in the nation for sure.
Yeah, you it's interesting because you had the whole roster overhaul last year, and now you've kind of had a season as like the measuring stick of where that group was. And it obviously was not especially up front on both sides, but especially on the offensive line, it was not up to par with where Deion Sanders wants this team to be. And I think that they've done a really good job early on. Obviously, the focus is flipping now to the defensive side with just signing day coming up tomorrow, early signing day. But they've improved on the offensive line. I really like Justin Mayers. I really like Tyler Johnson. Buffs will be getting Tyler Brown back as well. That's a big addition. Was one of the best players in the FCS a couple of seasons ago at Jackson State. So I think that they've done a really nice job building that front with depth, and with guys that can play a lot of different positions, guys that can do a lot of different things, some guys that are really good run blockers, really good pass blockers. It'll be really interesting to me to see how the competition at those spots plays out through the spring. Obviously, we're going to have some departures after spring ball, just like there was last year. But I'm curious to see how that group kind of forms, and kind of plays out, who wins those position battles in camp in the spring.
Yeah, Coach Prime has definitely eased some concern, especially with the commitment of Jordan Seaton over this offseason. Definitely one of the headline, not if the handed headline of the offseason. This was a guy that had numerous offers. There was so many different options for him on the table, and he did it in a very profound manner, going on undisputed and really making a name for himself, and really just making a full commitment to Colorado. And it was such a, I think, an important announcement, just to bring in other guys and really show that Colorado is bringing 5-star guys. So guys of that caliber, 4-star guys, they can look at that program and be like, okay, they're building something interesting if they're bringing in 5-star Jordan Seaton. I think he's going to be really compelling, potential starting piece next season, going into the fall, where the most important facet of this team is to protect Shedeur. And like you said, spring ball, and of course it's only December, we can only look so far ahead. But this was such an important and definitive acquisition this offseason, is getting just Jordan Seaton. It's 5 stars really make a name for a program. I mean, there's been a 5-star every year with Travis Hunter, Cormani McLean, and now Jordan Seaton. So there's going to be a few surprises tomorrow with signing day, but I think the offensive line is in such good shape right now. And I think looking at some other positions too, I mean, they picked up 3 wide receivers: Terrell Timmons from NC State, Cordell Russell from TCU. He's a 4-star coming out of high school. He's ranked 130 nationally. I mean, Texas is such a competitive state for football in general, and you're talking about the number 19 wide receiver in the state. There's a lot of potential there, but I think in that group as well, there's always been such a sturdy wide receiver room with Colorado, and this is definitely an addition that's going to be interesting to watch. I think especially if Shedeur has the protection that he needs. Like, these guys could all be incorporated. You have Will Shepherd too. Like, that was a really also important commitment from that Colorado acquired, and 47 catches, 684 yards, and 8 touchdowns. Like, that, those are a lot of numbers, but when you look at, his games with the SEC, there was some fluctuation there. Maybe it was just the caliber of the team, the caliber of the offense, that he couldn't really get going in that same regard he did, in non-conference. But definitely a really productive season. You just look at those numbers, like, outright there. If he has, a guy like Shedeur throwing the ball, I think he's going to be that guy that steps in for, Xavier Weaver, and is just that starting piece that is able to move around the field and really get that offense to move the chains in, different ways. And yeah, I really like him as well, and tight end as well, but we'll get into him. What do you think about this wide receiver room?
Yeah, I think they've done a really nice job rebuilding the talent depth there. Shepherd, as you mentioned, he's been productive. Some of those SEC numbers, he was on a Vandy team that the offensive line was subpar. The quarterback play was pretty subpar, so that hurts him a little bit. But you love having a guy that's flash talent and has played against these top defenses, these top corners in the SEC. Obviously, the Buffs are losing Xavier Weaver. They'll get Jimmy Horn back. One of the things, they'll get Omarion Miller back too, who I know you and I both love. He wasn't used as much as we maybe thought after he had that monster USC game, but obviously in that game, he really flashed a ton of talent. And the big thing that sticks out to me about them bringing in so much talent, they're bringing in Draylon Miller too out of high school. He could be a piece, maybe more of a gadgety piece as a true freshman, but he could build into a really strong receiver for this team. But I wonder if they're thinking about limiting Travis Hunter's snaps. And I know it's kind of beating the same drum over and over, but if they want Travis Hunter to be healthy 12 games out of the year, obviously he's an incredible talent on both sides of the ball, but can he play 120 snaps, 130 snaps a game and stay healthy through the entire year? Them rebuilding this receiver room, kind of restocking, retooling, gives them the depth to maybe say, Travis Hunter, maybe you can play 30 snaps, 25 snaps on offense instead of every snap, because we know that he's one of the top receivers in the country when he's out there, but how can they manage his workload? And I think that bringing in those 3 transfers and then Miller from high school, I think that will allow them to do that if they choose.
Certainly. Yeah, tight end. It was definitely something we all kind of speculated preseason, and you saw Mikey Harrison really step up, and now he's at SDSU with Sean Lewis, and the Buffs picked up Chimon Medier from Cincinnati. He's ranked number 100A in the Rivals transfer portal, 6'5", 248, 23 catches, 258 yards, and 5 touchdowns. I mean, when you're playing for a team like Cincinnati, it's good to, you're getting action like he did at his role. I think it's important that, you're bringing that experience to Colorado, because I think that's something that was missing last year. But even though Mikey Harrison did step up, was, that experienced tight end that could really, do the role, can block, can, catch passes. And this is something that they needed, a sizable guy that had experience that can really play the role in the facets that it needs to. And I think Medier is going to be, the number one guy. I think definitely a concern within the tight end role is the depth there still. I mean, there's one scholarship guy there. Let me see. Louis Passarella, which is, an interesting case to say the least. So I think maybe picking up another tight end there, but this guy is definitely going to be the guy going into next season and is going to serve that prominent role and really give Shedeur another option on the field.
Yeah, good piece. Big body, played in the Big 12 last year, so some familiarity with those teams, with those opponents a little bit. And a guy who's bigger than Mikey Harrison, who did a lot of great things as a receiver last year, but for this Buffs offense to evolve into more of a balanced unit, I know we'll talk about Pat Shurmur and the overall offense in a little bit. But they needed more of a true Y inline tight end. Can he contribute as a blocker in the run game on the end of the line of scrimmage? And can you also flex him out and use him as a receiver? They needed more versatility at that spot. And you're right about the depth. They need more depth. I expect them to bring in some more bodies here as we get through the winter and into the spring to kind of fill that room out. I don't know how much different the offense will look if Shurmur is really at the helm of it, but more balance at that position, and it's just going to allow having a guy that can play on the end of the line of scrimmage is going to allow them to do so many more things in the run game, which obviously, as we know, was a big issue last year. So really like the ad and looking for more depth at that spot, but I think that Shimon Matire is a good start there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, let's flip over to defense here. I mean, the defense last year was so, I think, confusing in, certain ways. There was a lot of, inconsistencies on both sides of the ball. But of course, the trenches were a prominent issue there. But, we there's such a versatile, like, secondary there. You have Shiloh Sanders, you have Travis Hunter, you have, Kamani McLean getting his reps here and there, Cameron Silman Craig. There's just so many pieces, downfield that really made this, to me, like, such a intriguing and probably pretty dominant defense. And I think what, hurt them sometimes were, a handful of missed tackles, certainly. And, a defensive line that, couldn't stop the run. It was like from the front and back there, they had these, solid guys, but there were just, those mistakes there. And I think with the pieces that they had Anquan Barnes from Alabama, Chidozie Nwankwo from Houston. He is a really, really key addition to that defensive line. I think they definitely need the depth there. And he 5'11", 290 pounds. His career stats include 32 starts, 95 tackles, 13 tackles for loss, and 5 sacks. I mean, yeah, there's certainly numbers there. And I think we saw what Jordan Dominic is, a guy with a lot of high production. And I think that can translate with Nwankwo here. Jordan Dominic was someone that we really looked at going into the preseason, and then he ended up really giving the Buffs a lot. And I think this Chidozie is going to be a key facet in that front and stopping the run and doing what, ultimately the defense needs to do is just limit these yards. I mean, the Buffs defense last year was one of the worst in the country just from a yardage standpoint. So, they just need more size and need a little bit more experience. And I really like Chidozie. And we'll see what Anquan Barnes can contribute there too. But Chidozie is like certainly someone I'm looking at. I'm like, this is going to be a guy that makes a big impact.
Yeah, Nwankwo's probably my favorite pickup that they've had so far, because to me that move represents everything that this defense needs to evolve into a better unit. You mentioned all of the talent that they had, and that resulted in a lot of splash plays. They forced a ton of turnovers. Shiloh Sanders forced a bunch of fumbles. Obviously, you had the spectacular Travis Hunter interceptions against TCU, against UCLA. But those splash plays, those takeaways, that's what makes a good defense great. You can't build the boat out of just turning teams over, because not every team's just going to give you the ball. What they needed was more sustainability down to down. And Nwankwo really provides that. He's not going to be a guy that shows up and has 13 sacks next year. That's not who he is. But he played a lot of weak side D tackle at Houston. He could play on the nose. He could play in the A gap. He's a great run stuffer. PFF had him as a 78.2 run defense grade last year. Really solid grade, especially for someone who's maybe a hair undersized for a nose. But another guy who played in the Big 12 last year, so he's got some familiarity with these opponents. And he's a guy that's going to come in on first and second down. He's going to eat up double teams. He's going to make it tough on opponents to just run the football. And if having a guy like that turns 2nd and 4 into 2nd and 8, if he turns 3rd and 2 into 3rd and 6, because teams are not picking up 4 or 5 yards on these successful first down runs, that's a big deal. And I think that those are the foundational pieces that you need to have a solid defense, and then you can put the splash plays on top of that to really take you over the top.
Yeah, exactly. Sustainability and a lot of flash and really make a productive defense. So we'll see how Charles Kelly really responds this season and what he can do with all of these new pieces they have again. I feel like last year was such a foundational season to really answer a lot of questions we had on what was this roster overhaul going to look like? How is this team going to operate? And of course, the season ensued 4-8, and there were some more questions going into this offseason and how they were going to restore the offensive line, what they were going to do on the defensive line. But 15 transfers later and some really notable freshman commitments are going to once again make this team a really compelling and flashy team. And I think there's no shortage of stories and excitement when it comes to Deion Sanders' roster. So I'm excited. I think signing day tomorrow is going to be a very interesting and chaotic day once again. I remember last year it was like just so many names back and forth. I was like, wow, this is, they're working. Anytime there's an eye emoji tweeted, I'm like, okay. I'm like, who's coming? Like there must be something in the air.
Yeah.
But yeah, really excited about this transfer class. It's number one on Rivals within the Pac-12. So he's definitely putting in the work, Coach Prime. He usually does time and time again. There we see it. And just looking at the coaches too. I mean, I think it's Coach Prime. That's something that he mentioned. Is just the coaching changes there. Sean Lewis. I think San Diego State is such a good fit for him. And I think they just acquired a 4-star cornerback too. So, they're working down there too. Phil Lodeholt. That was the biggest question here: is who's gonna take over the offensive line? Like who's gonna lead one of like the most like controversial or just like unfortunate performances last year? And Phil Lodeholt, Minnesota, offensive tackle. This was a guy that has, NFL experience. I think that's really compelling for guys to, see that firsthand because he's still pretty, close with his NFL ties. He played in the 2010s, and I think he has a really, solid relationship with, Coach Prime. Coach Prime had a lot of praise for him and what he can contribute and how he can teach these guys to provide what an offensive line should provide as protection for Shedeur. So he was a really crucial part in what was going to happen this offseason. I'm excited to, talk to him in the future and get to know more about him. Nick Williams at Syracuse now. I think, he's following Fran Brown. They have, ties at Georgia there. He's the head coach. And, I think Syracuse is going to build something interesting. You see, I think Nick Saban and his assistants disseminated around college football, and now it's similarly happening with Georgia. So, that's a compelling program. We'll see what King Joseph Edwards says, this afternoon. There's Colorado and Syracuse on the table there. But now Vincent Dancy, former quality control defensive analyst, is now the defensive ends coach. And I think, he worked his way up. He deserves the role. And I think he's really, passionate and has a really close relationship with Coach Prime. And, I think the guys, like when you have defensive end guys, like those are like the tough guys that like fight it out. And I think Vincent Dancy like emulates that personality, like those hard, tough-nosed guys that like go in and just like, tear quarterbacks apart. So, we'll get to know more about him too. But, these are all key pieces. And of course, the biggest question is, what is going to happen with Pat Shurmur? Is he going to be the offensive coordinator? Is Coach Prime going to find someone else? And we've heard interviews of, Coach Prime denoting that he may be the offensive coordinator next year. He trusts his input. And, just in that game, the towards the end of the season with Arizona, we saw a game that the Buffs were this close to winning. Arizona was such a unique team last year, but they were moving the ball so efficiently. And, this was a game that Pat Shurmur really, proved himself in certain ways. And of course, Oregon State happened, Washington State. I mean, that game was maybe potentially just like a wash, more or less. Shedeur wasn't feeling well. That game just kind of felt like last year. And I think there were so many ups and downs with his play calling. There was, clock management, maybe that's part of it as well. But, when you're a Broncos fan, I know you're not fully a Broncos fan, but there are a lot of like, heavy hearts with what he did with that organization. And there's just, he's a compelling piece. And it's like, yes, he can run an offense, but is this the offense that Colorado needs?
Yeah, I think that's who it's going to be. Quickly on the assistants too. Vincent Dancy, I like the hire. I like the different backgrounds that they're bringing in on the staff. Vincent Dancy,
Mm-hmm.
former DC, former head coach down at Mississippi Valley State. I like the experience he brings. And Phil Lodeholt worked under Bill Bednaw at Oklahoma, highly regarded offensive line coach, and a guy that did it at a high level on the offensive line in college at Oklahoma and for the Minnesota Vikings. So really like those two hires, and it only took him Lodeholt about 12 hours before he got Jordan Seaton to commit. So he's off to a good start. Now to Shermer. That's the big question, right? I'm guessing that since nobody's really heard anything else to this point, that's probably the direction that they're going to go. My question is, what does it look like? Because he takes over an offense from an analyst position. He gets promoted to play caller mid-season last year. So he doesn't really get to mold the offense in the way that he wants it to be. Obviously, Deion Sanders has said over and over that he contributed throughout the entire year to how the offense was formed, the scheming, the game planning, the designs, all of that stuff. But now, if he is indeed the guy, he gets a full offseason to kind of put his twist on it. I'm curious what that looks like, because in the NFL, obviously he was the head coach for the Giants. He was the OC for the Broncos, which I know a lot of my Colorado people have varying thoughts on. But do we see, this ties into my tight ends point from earlier, do we see more of a pro style kind of twist? Do we see them try to run the ball a little bit more? Do we see them try to put two tight ends on the field some, if they end up with good depth at the tight end position? Do we see them try to move not fully away, because you can't move fully away from this kind of offense when you have a quarterback that's as good as Shedeur Sanders, but do they try and balance it out a little bit more, control the clock a little bit, help their defense out? Is that more of an emphasis after Pat Shurmur has an offseason as the OC, or is it still going to be the same thing? Because, and I say that because Sean Lewis came in last year and the tempo looked a lot like it did with Sean Lewis at Kent State, but it was Sean Lewis at Kent State. They ran the ball all the time, and then they didn't here. Was that just personnel based? Obviously, so you struggle to run the ball. You have an awesome quarterback. You want to throw it all the time. So was that an influence? I don't know what fully influenced the change in Sean Lewis's offense from Kent State to CU, but I wonder if Shurmur will have the leeway to kind of tweak it and see if he can balance it out a little bit more, play some more complementary football. And I think that will help them on both sides of the ball if they're able to do that.
Yeah, that's ultimately, the ambition is playing complementary football. Certainly easier said than done, as we saw last season. And there's a lot of, I think there's across college football, there's teams that are known for offense and their defense. They're not really known for both. It's a varying and hard battle to really acquire for teams, but who knows? We'll see with all the additions that Coach Prime has brought in and just these new faces around the program, around the facility. This is year two. Well, it's just as exciting. It's just as compelling, and it's really meeting up to that same level that it was last year. I think just on the transfer front, and like there's just always like that, underlying belief that Coach Prime is going to get it done. And he certainly got it done in the front of the O-line and the trenches there. So that was certainly a priority. And it's going to be another exciting year. And we just wanted to catch up with you guys and really break down. I mean, and I just remember sitting at the Utah game and just the end of it. And I was like, man, so much stuff is going to happen after this. And as it always does, there's always so much news, and it's always an exciting program to cover. But yeah, thank you for sitting down with us and talking, Troy. It's good to see you again. And Hopefully, I'll see you at a basketball game soon. The Buffs right now, they're that basketball team is, that win against Miami was much needed, and they just dominated them. So they have wins like that. Let's see if Tad Boyle can keep that consistency. Yeah, they're an exciting team to watch for sure.
Yeah, Buffs basketball, men's and women's, both making some runs. Both going to be in the mix, especially the Pac-12 and the men's side is.
Ooh.
That's a story for another day. It's a conversation for another day, but yikes, so far. Early returns on the Pac-12 are not great.
Oh my goodness. Well, yeah, I mean, well, I guess it's not going to exist next year anyway. So, gotta go out with a bang. I'm hoping to see Washington in the championship game, kind of rooting for them. Michigan, Washington, that's
Picks. Give me your picks. Michigan, Washington.
yeah.
Who's winning? Michigan or Washington?
See, I want Washington, but I'm saying Michigan. I feel like they're going to put up a fight though. I just don't know how well Washington's defense can hold up against JJ McCarthy and the crew. So
I'm full fading you. Texas over Alabama. That's my pick.
All right. Well, those are our picks. Yeah. Oh man, that would be an exciting one too. Both of these teams. I mean, yeah, we won't get into the FSU conversation. That's already passed, but those are our picks. Thanks for sitting down with us, guys. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks, Nikki. Always a pleasure.